Hello, 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 LinkedIn, and for the first time, hello, also YouTube Live, and hello, Rob.
Uh,
Welcome.
hey Beth, good to have good to join you
I
here.
know you're
Thanks for
used
having
to
me.
having people
I know,
join you.
totally.
Ah, all right. So for
Good to
people
have.
who don't know me or don't know Rob or watching on replay, I'm Beth Granger. I'm a LinkedIn trainer, coach, and speaker, and facilitator of networking groups and events like LinkedIn Local. And my guest Rob is the social media and community manager from Thinkific, an online learning platform you may have heard about. And we're going to talk about all sorts of things. So welcome, Rob. Rob, where are you joining us from?
Where am I joining you from? Yeah, thanks for having me. It's always really awesome to hang out with you, Beth, and amazing things that you're doing and sharing on LinkedIn and now on YouTube and everywhere else. Yeah, so I'm based in Vancouver, so the entire Thinkific team is here mostly. We have a couple people that are around the globe, kind of working remotely for a season. But yeah, myself, I'm here in right now sunny Vancouver, but freezing. Yeah, really excited to be hanging out with you today.
Yay. And it's so funny for people that aren't in the social media world or necessarily in the LinkedIn Live world. This community has really formed of people that all support each other. And when somebody gets access to LinkedIn Live, suddenly they're talking with everybody and saying, "Hey, what tools are you using? What tools?
Yeah.
How's it going?" And everybody's so supportive. It's fabulous.
Yeah, isn't it? Yeah, I mean, every time, we see somebody that gets access to LinkedIn Live, everyone's so excited.
Yeah.
It's really cool. So, and it is very supportive. I mean, countless questions that I've had about LinkedIn. There's so many people out there that have just been so really helpful. So, yeah, no, it's the best.
And a bit of housekeeping for those joining us. If I'm looking over here, it's because that's where the comments are coming in from LinkedIn. The comments from
Okay.
YouTube are coming in over here. And so I see
Yeah.
Brian. Hey, Brian, welcome. And Timothy and Mark, thanks for joining us. Where to begin? So, where I want to begin? I think, I do some teaching at a local college in the
Yep.
continuing ed program. And there's a
Mhm.
course called the 3-day social media intensive. And I teach a couple of those sessions. And a question I get often is, what is a community manager? So what do you do as
Okay.
a community manager?
Good question. Yeah. So community management. So there's a lot of people will put community manager. Now we're talking about Facebook groups or online communities under the umbrella and the duties of a social media manager. It's kind of like, they kind of think it's the same thing, but it's really, really different. So a social media person is out there trying to get the message out, right? From
Yep.
whatever brand they're in. They're trying to get the message out through all the social channels and then bringing that attention into whatever that brand is trying to share on their channel and then eventually get them into their website. So that's a social media manager is more outward facing, right? They're trying to go out there into the market, attract people with the content, and then bring them into the, to the world of whatever that brand is. Now, a community manager is somebody that then is really cultivating and creating a community within the people that already love and use whatever the product or brand is. So whether that is rallying around and building a community around a cause, like an idea, or a brand, or a person, right, an entrepreneur or something. So yeah, it's two different things. At Thinkific, there's me, social media manager. I'm also a community manager, but now that role is becoming sort of more and more split. And there's teams that are being built for both. So it's really important, to understand that. A lot of people kind of just like, hey, you're my social media manager, or you go and build me a community as well. But it's two different mindsets.
That's great. And I think that's important for organizations to realize. I also think that it's harder to measure the
Mm-hmm.
results of community management because it's not meant to directly, right? Like a lot of social media is meant to have a specific
Mm-hmm.
action come from it. Whereas
Mm-hmm.
I see community management as being more keeping that relationship going and keeping people, if they're already your fans, keeping them your fans and making them
Mm-hmm.
feel like ambassadors themselves for the organization or product.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That's exactly it. And I love the word ambassador because that is what happens. That's sort of like one of the best things that you want to come out of your community is to then build and raise up ambassadors for your brand. I'm really curious too, people that are tuning in on LinkedIn, like who currently has a community manager, who's currently building a community. Would love to know that. Let us know in the comments. But yeah, within Thinkific's community, there have been brand ambassadors that have now kind of rised up and are doing things now offline. So they're coming together and organizing meetups.
Oh, great. Yeah.
Man, LinkedIn is a big example of this. There's LinkedIn Local. These are people like yourself and
Yep.
Brian and everybody else that are putting together these LinkedIn Local events. Now, you are in many ways brand ambassadors for LinkedIn. So you are taking those online relationships and now you're bringing them offline. And that's really what people want. Like when we started opening that up, people love that because, a lot of online entrepreneurs and business owners, it's really hard to create community offline in person. And so whenever there's an opportunity like that, people jump on it.
Yeah, it's really, it's been fascinating to watch. So I got involved pretty early with the LinkedIn Local before LinkedIn did. So they were cautiously watching, not stopping it, not just kind of seeing what happened. And yeah, it's been pretty amazing, especially because the different communities around the world doing LinkedIn Local events have connected with each other too.
Right.
So you get to know people doing them and you can say, hey, what did you do for your event? What did you do for your event? And hey, welcome Jamie and Patty. Thanks for joining us.
Jamie, hey Patty, how's it going? I want to add to that because it is really cool to have all of these different LinkedIn local groups. And I feel like for a lot of people that travel around and maybe speak and stuff like that, it's almost like, hey, I'm going to go visit this city. Like, for example, next week I'll be in Los Angeles for a conference. And I tapped into right away, like, hey, who's in Los Angeles? Is there a LinkedIn local happening in Los Angeles? And no surprise, there is. So, and then so you kind of like get to see who's in Los Angeles and kind of like what's the village, who's the village in Los Angeles, right? So it's kind of cool that the world is getting smaller and smaller and there's communities being built. It's really cool to see.
Well, I'm going to do the same thing that I hadn't thought of this. I'm going to be in Rochester, Minnesota, speaking at the Mayo Clinic Social Media Network annual conference. That's a mouthful. In a couple weeks. And that might be a really fun thing to do. I know I'm going to go live and I haven't decided yet if it's with the people that put on the event or some of the speakers. I have to figure that out, but that would be really fun. Would be to see if there's been a LinkedIn local there, or if there are people to reach out to. Yeah.
Oh, I'm sure you're like 1 or 2 degrees away from somebody that is organizing something there. So
always.
Yeah.
And when I first observed that happening, 2010 or 11, I first went on Twitter, and I thought Twitter was kind of silly at first. People talking about coffee and bacon, and then I stumbled on this conversation. And I don't know if you remember, but way back then, the Gap had changed their logo. Nobody liked it, and they changed it back. So 5 art directors, essentially, or 5 people were talking about it on Twitter and realized to keep mentioning the other 4 people, there was no room to say anything. So they randomly came up with a hashtag.
Yeah.
And that conversation grew to hundreds of people around the world. People hired each other through it. People met in person and married each other through it. I mean, it really was an amazing, something you couldn't force to happen. As a community manager, for instance, you couldn't make that happen. It just was a time and place, but fascinating.
Yeah, that's crazy. Yeah, I mean, there's hashtags here on LinkedIn, LinkedIn creators, LinkedIn fam. These are huge hashtags that people use all the time. We got Brian Schulman here, Voice Your Vibe. I mean, that's a huge hashtag, right? So shout out to him. But yeah, and so that's great. Community is huge. So find it where you can. It's not as hard as you think, right? So, it's really easy. Like for me, my career community, for work and business, they're primarily online. with folks that I do see at conferences and things like that and events. But for the most part, they live online and we connect online. But that doesn't mean that, outside of touching and, feeling them, we can still communicate, we can still collaborate, we can still do work together. So yeah, it's definitely very powerful. Especially if you're going to different events and workshops and things like that, make sure that you do connect on LinkedIn after, and then build that community. So.
Yep, it's true. In fact, I was doing a training for a client today, and one of the sessions or segments of it was about what to do before, during, and after a conference or a trade show.
Right.
And it was all that there's stuff you can do ahead of time, right? Like I know I'm going to be in Florida later this year, and so I looked on my LinkedIn. Who do I know in Florida? You don't always know where people are because you communicate with them, but you don't always know. So I think that's great.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Something I had been experimenting with LinkedIn events.
Okay.
And that's kind of like Facebook events, but on LinkedIn where you can put up an event. And so I put it out there that you and I were speaking today, and I said, what questions you have? What do you want to know about? And sort of to switch gears. Oh, and hi, Sue. LinkedIn, Sue says, LinkedIn locals in Australia are promoted on Eventbrite, and I promote my own events there too. Very useful. Yep.
Awesome. Amazing.
Yeah. So in terms of switching gears a little bit to talk about online training, and this could be pre-recorded training or things like through Thinkific or live but online training. I do a lot through Zoom, for instance. We had some questions. So, hi, Michael. Thanks for joining us. So one of the questions somebody asked was, what types of online courses get the most traction? So what have you noticed?
That's a great question. That's a really hard question because really there's no one type of course that really stands out to me. It's kind of like asking what business does really well. It's like all types of businesses do really well. Because I've seen, being at Thinkific for over 3 years now, I've seen all types of courses. There's really successful ones that you would naturally think are online courses. So coaching, business type of coaching, that's always really good. That's been happening for a lot of years now. People are training sales teams, through online courses. But there's really successful courses that are hula hooping courses.
I'd love it.
Deanne Love, big shout out to her. She's one of our longest using, course creator. She's out in Australia, and she has a whole hula hooping academy, and she does amazingly well. So there's a gentleman named Cliff who bakes cakes, and he teaches people how to bake cakes, and he just crushes it on online courses. There's so many. There's a sewing course that does really well. There's a sort of like a torch kind of art lady in Seattle that has an amazing course and program. There's just so many. I love it. There's other ones that I don't know if I can even share on a public forum like this. But there are all types of courses, and it's kind of funny. I think there's a lot of courses that people take that they wouldn't take in night school or like a weekend class in person. They want to take it in the privacy of their own home or office, right? Like a hula hooping one. You can't find a hula hooping course, at the rec center or at the Y, right? So so there's all types of courses. I think it's just like any business. And this is a message that we always have, setting expectations for online course creators it is just like any business. It does take time to create. You got to invest, you got to build it, you got to work hard to market it as well. But if you're willing to do that, then it's a very lucrative, business to build.
I think that's a great, great insights that you have there. One of the other questions is, now, of course, if the person who asked this question is with us watching, of course, Rob can only share from his insights from Thinkific. There, of course, other platforms that do that sort of thing and other ways that people do it. Some people just do, videos on YouTube. So this was a very specific one. Have any of the courses ever been used for remote corporate training? I would imagine yes on that one, but you can tell.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Like one of the there's a good friend of mine, Andrew Silito, who's also on LinkedIn. He might be tuning in here, but yeah, he does corporate training in person. He does workshops for
like what I do.
Fortune 500 company. Yeah, so he goes around the world and he does that. And so then what he does then is he has it he records all of those training sessions, and then he puts that up on his Thinkific site. And then the rest of the company, if they missed it or if they want to rewatch it, they can consume his training again. Now there are some people that can't afford to fly him out, to their location, their city, and so then he then offers remote training through his online courses on demand. So yeah, absolutely, that's a very natural fit.
Great. Oh, Jonathan, welcome. Yes, and Jonathan was the person that put up those questions.
Oh, nice.
And the third question was, and this is obviously very specific, have they been used for ongoing training for franchisees or licensees? Well, before you answer, I'll tell you that I have seen things like that online, not necessarily through any specific platform, but why don't you tell us?
Yep. Yeah, sure. Yeah. Locally, there is a company that is a locksmith company. And it's a franchise, and I've met this gentleman. He's the only channel that he really invests in and markets through is YouTube. And so so he's got his whole entire franchisee training on Thinkific, and all around the North America, and I believe globally now he's got franchises for his locksmith business. And that's how he trains all of
his guys.
How to pick different locks. It is actually, that is really funny. It is like how to pick different safes by like different brand and models, and that's what his YouTube channel is about. And he gets, I don't know who's watching them, obviously, but he's getting a lot of views, and that's how he builds his business. So no, definitely, franchisee training for sure.
That's fascinating. Do you find that, so, as community manager for this kind of a product or this kind of service, do you find that you're acting as a support person? Do people ask you a lot of questions? What happens?
That's a good question. Yeah, that's a good question. So our community is primarily support. It is really a place where people can go and ask their questions. I would say that's probably the majority of it, let's say 75%. But the other 25% of it is a mixture of, people looking to understand, is online courses for them? This is a real thing. I want to meet some people that are actually doing this and get their insight rather than like directly from the company that is the platform. So I want to hear from other course creators and see if this is a real thing before I really dive into it. We have partners that are in there. And so yeah, it is primarily support. That's just naturally what happens. But it's also a place where people are sharing ideas. And so as a community manager, it's just like, I always kind of, use the example of like having a barbecue or a house party, right? Or a dinner party. And you're the host, right? You're the host of that community. So you have to start the conversations. And so we have a weekly, daily threads where we start and incite conversations. And then also, just like as a really good host, when you have a dinner party, you know each of the different individuals that are in your party, and you can kind of see the synergies between different individuals, and then you introduce them, and then you walk away.
Exactly like the networking events or groups that I facilitate. It's the exact same thing. It's I had a guest on a couple of weeks ago, Mike Roderick. And he talked about, I'm not going to remember all the analogy, but it was like kind of, you go to an event and there are sharks, dolphins, drowners, and savers. So a shark is the kind of person that's going up to everybody, pushing their card in their face, that kind of thing. A dolphin is somebody who's maybe, I can't remember what a dolphin does. And then a drowner is somebody the kind of person will stand in the corner and won't be comfortable starting a conversation. And then the savers are the people that see that going on and go over and start the conversation with them, bring them into a group, introduce them around. So it really is in person or online. It's very similar behavior.
Yeah, it's really the same thing. It's really the same thing. And yeah, you want to make sure that, and then also as a community manager, it is also your job when someone comes to your dinner party and they're being rude and obnoxious, and maybe they are a little too salesy and a little too aggressive, you're the one that has to ask them to leave. And so that's that's also one of the roles as a community manager.
Well, hopefully you don't have to do that too much.
No, we don't have to do that too much anymore these days. Yeah, we've laid down the rules. So
and
yeah.
I've noticed, so for instance, I use StreamYard as the broadcast tool. Some people don't know that on LinkedIn, you have to use a third-party tool. So I use a tool called StreamYard, and you're in the StreamYard community as well. And it's such a great group. And they, they say, put up what are you doing this week so we can join you, and people ask questions. And the fascinating thing to me is always that the people from the brand don't always have to answer the question because other people in the community will. So this probably happens with you too.
Yeah. That's actually, honestly, that's one of the things that we have decided as a team, to leave questions there and not jump and answer them right away, and let the other community members answer them, because they do. And again, it just, for all the benefits, but also because now the community feels empowered, right? They're now part of that community. They're contributing, rather than it's always the Thinkific show and it's all, me and Aaron and Patty and all these different Thinkific employees.
Right.
Yeah, we need to step away, and it's hard because you see it and you're like, oh, I want to answer it, but I know somebody else knows this question. And for a lot of them, the community members have better answers than we do, so so it's totally fine.
Well, and I think sometimes this happens on LinkedIn a lot. I think the brand or the platform does not always know how the users are using it. There are things that people figure out how to do that the brand have never thought of. Yeah.
No, absolutely. And that's actually a really good point. I forgot to mention that a lot of people that are in our community are always sharing feedback, and they do it in such a nice way where they're like, you know what, we know that things are always improving, but it would be really cool if I could have this feature, and they're so nice about it, and they do it in a really genuine way. And for us, we value that. So if you're a business out there and you have a community, a lot of business owners and a lot of brands, I find, kind of take that as an insult, like, oh, like, yeah, of course, like, we'll get to that when we get to it. But it's really valuable. If a user is coming publicly and saying like, hey, I would really love this to be done and for you to create this, it means that it really means a lot to them, right? That is their business. It is your business to have that platform or that software. But for that user, that's like so important that they want to share publicly, and maybe at the risk of maybe getting shut down or somebody commenting something. So those kind of moments and that kind of feedback has to be supported by the community manager and the people that are in that community. So that's our job as well. So we love feedback. A lot of the features that are built on Thinkific has been a result of users sharing their feedback inside of our community. So why not? If your users are telling you what to build, then then do that. Yeah.
Well, and I think there are a lot of companies out there that get a great idea and say, I think we're going to build whatever, but that doesn't mean anybody wants it. So if you actually listen to the people using it, they'll give you your whole plan. You don't need to,
Exactly. And this also goes, that whole idea of just listening to community also goes for online course creators. So, if you're building and creating content, if you're creating anything, right? If you have, and you're trying to, share it with an audience, whether it's a YouTube video or LinkedIn content or courses, you put it out there, listen to the comments, listen to the feedback, because from time and time again, people have sent messages to me when I share a tutorial about something on LinkedIn. And then I'll get messages like, hey, Rob, like, how long should a LinkedIn Live be? And it's like, hey, that's like the third time I've been asked that question. I should probably create a YouTube video about that or a tutorial about that, right? So listen to your audience, and essentially they'll help you build whatever you're trying to build. So, yeah.
It's so funny. Again, today at the same client, we were talking about that exact thing of combination of, if I don't know what content to share. So we were talking a lot about sharing content, and I said, answer the questions that you get all the time. I'm sure you have, right? What do people ask you constantly?
Right.
There you go. There's content.
That's easy.
And I know Mark, who may still be watching with us, does quite a bit of video. I don't know, Mark, do you do live video? If you're still on, let us know. And we're coming. I can't believe it's already here 7:26 and they're whatever 4:26. But we're coming to the end of the half hour. So exactly, you typed it quicker than I could. Anybody have any questions or anything that you'd like to ask either one of us? Please share them. And
Yeah.
And while we wait and see if anybody has any, let's. I would say what I like to do is key takeaways. So for me from this conversation, I really enjoyed talking about the difference between a social media manager and a community manager, because I don't think everybody thinks it's different. Oh, and let's see what we have. Sue says, I was listening to a Teachable Live webinar, and they suggested that sometimes the best courses are created by people who have just learned a skill. Interesting.
That's good. Yeah. I mean, that's, that's fair. Yeah, it's a really good tip. I think a lot of course creators, I've heard that they try to teach a previous version of themselves. So whatever you've learned, and a good example is like, somebody in grade 3 has something to teach somebody that's in grade 2, so yeah, that's great. That's
Absolutely.
great. If you learn something, then share that.
And Timothy just brought up the idea of monitoring competitive social channels for conversations that are getting engagement. Yeah, and you can do that really anywhere, right? You can do that on Twitter, you can do that on LinkedIn, you can do that anywhere that's a public forum. You can see what people are talking about.
Yep.
So what about you? Key takeaways from this conversation. What do you think people should think about or look into further?
Yeah, I think just on the note of community and community building and things like that, I think that's really important. To me, we have so many. We always look at how many followers do you have on YouTube or on LinkedIn? How many people are you connected to? But like, really, how many people are you actually really connected to? That you have genuine conversations with, that you're able to do collaborations with, So you can be in a room, a room full of people, yet feel very lonely. So I really hope that you're not one of those where you are in this ocean of connections and everything on LinkedIn.
With the sharks.
With the sharks, yet you have no one that you can lean on. When some type of business issue comes up, or if there's an opportunity that you'd like to share, or there's something you're working on, or that you want to get excited about, and there's nobody that's really rooting you on. So I hope that just the only takeaway, if any, is that if you can start building community, I think it's really important for everyone.
It is. It's, to me, it's online communities, in-person communities, geographic communities, right? Like I love my town where I live. So I think that's really, really important, especially these days. I mean, I love social media, but I feel like people have become much more distant from each other in some ways because of it. So if you can collaborate and create communities, it's incredibly powerful. Wow. So this half hour is almost up. Thank you so much for joining me. This has been so much fun. Everybody who was with us live, thank you. Thank you for being part of the experiment of sending it to YouTube. I'm not really sure what happened there. I'll have to go look. We got some comments, so people were there. And if you're watching on replay, I will take a look at the comments in the future. Unfortunately, LinkedIn doesn't really notify you when you have new comments, which is kind of odd. Maybe I can get them to do that. Maybe they'll listen.
Hope you're listening. Yeah.
I'll tweet it to them. So wow, yeah. So have a great rest of the day. It's evening here. It's about to be evening there. This was so much fun. Thank you, everybody. This was great, and see you all next week.
Thanks, everyone.